All right, good evening, everybody. And, welcome to our ninth study in the Book of Jude. It seems like we keep dragging this out and dragging it out. It's not a long book, but it's taken us forever to get through it, just because of things happening in life and the world and everything else. So, anyway, let me get back to my first page here. But we're going to continue here in verses 17 through 19. 17 through 19 in the book of Jude, where it reads, "But you, beloved, remember the words which are spoken before by the apostles of our Lord Jesus Christ, how they told you that there would be mockers in the last time, who would walk according to their own ungodly lust. These are sensual persons, who cause divisions, not having the Spirit." So once again, we see that Jude is still talking to the church. This letter is written to the church. It's not written to the world. It's written to the church. And the entire letter is written to the church to warn them, again, about threats that were within the church at that very moment. Not threats to come, but threats that were within the church at that time. And he also wasn't asking the readers, the recipients, the church itself, to take his word for it. He was telling them to remember and consider what Christ and the apostles, primarily Peter, he's one wrote about these specific threats, had written to them just a few years before, which was warning the church about the threats to come, and they were at hand. Well, the Greek word for mockers means a mocker, a scoffer, an impostor, or a false prophet. And Jude refers to these false Christians as mockers because they were imposters. They were they were acting like they were Christians. They were Christians in name only. And they scoffed at Christ's teachings and the teaching of the various apostles. It was like, oh, don't worry about that. That's not what they meant. And just, oh, that wasn't for real. And things like that, just kind of putting them off and discounting those teachings. Well, Jesus warned of false prophets and false Christ. He warned that they would come along in the future to mislead the church. And we find this specifically in a few places in Matthew. So let's turn to Matthew 7, verse 15. Matthew 7:15. Where Jesus wrote, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves." So remember, these people, they're in sheep's clothing. They're acting as if they are part of the flock. They're acting as if they're in the church. They're church members. But they're actually there to cause problems, to deceive people, and basically gobble them up for the enemy. And that's what Peter was warning about in his second letter, which we studied some time ago. And later, during Jesus' Olivet Discourse, Jesus warned about false prophets again. Let's turn to Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Verses 3 through 5. It says, "Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us when these things will be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?' And Jesus answered and said to them, 'Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many.'" Then we can jump just a little bit to verse 11, where Jesus continued in that talk, saying, "Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many." This is the time part of the time that he was talking about, is what Peter was warning about and what Jude is writing about. And then on down the page to 24, starting with verse 23, where Jesus says, "Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here's the Christ,' or 'There,' do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. So Jesus was primarily telling the apostles what would come in the end times and during the tribulation. But the apostles, they were thinking the end was right then. It was right in front of them. It was about to happen right then. And it would come in their lifetimes. And took Jesus' warnings as something to be immediately concerned about. That these are things you need to be watching out for right now because I'm coming right back. And the problem, the thing here is that not even Jesus knew when he was coming back. When that time would come. And because of this, we as a church need to be on guard at all times against these things, since we could very well be in the end times, right before Jesus returns. And Jesus knew that those teachers and false prophets and false Christians would be around and began warning us during his ministry, just like he was talking about, where he said, we cast out demons in your name and prophesied in your name, but, and it's like, he said, get away from me, I never knew you. That kind of thing. And the apostles, they continued with those warnings during their ministry. They learned from Jesus and they continued with these warnings throughout their ministry over the rest of the century. And Paul wrote about these false teachers and such, and false Christians and so on, in a number of places also. So let's turn to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Starting with verse 12. Paul wrote, but what I do, I will also continue to do, that I may cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be regarded just as we are in the things of which they boast. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. So, again, Paul's talking about these people are going to act like they're Christians, act like they're proper teachers, and they're just deceiving people. And then let's move to Colossians. We're going to get a little exercise here, moving through the Bible. Colossians chapter 2, verse 18. Where it says, let no one cheat you of your reward, taking delight in false humility and worship of angels, intruding into those things which he has not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind. Remember, as we see today in these false teachers, they're frequently pretty arrogant. They'll go around, like, oh, I'm somebody, and they love their status. They love their status and all the attention that they get and things like that. And that's what's going on here. That these people were puffed up and they're vain, they're arrogant. And then on to 2 Thessalonians. Sorry, I gotta go back just a little bit. I didn't put them in quite order. Ed will be mad with me. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Excuse me, starting with verse 3. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. Where Paul wrote, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits on as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Do you remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way." It continues on, "And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the work of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason God will send them a strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, and that they may be condemned, who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in righteousness." Okay, this is talking about in the end time during the tribulation, after the rapture, but it's all the lies, the deception, and everything that the enemy does, that he throws out. And he's just constantly deceiving everybody. And then on to 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. "Now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth." And these people, they're going to be deceived and walk away. They're going to step away from the truth by listening to false teachers and people, again, that are mocking the faith and all this stuff, and pulling people away from the church. And that's all in these latter times, the last days that Jude was talking about. And then on to 2 Timothy chapter 2, starting with verse 15. 15 through 18. "Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. But shun profane and idle babblings, for they will increase to more ungodliness, and their message will spread like cancer. Hymenaeus and Philetus are of this sort, who have strayed concerning the truth, saying that the resurrection is already past, and they overthrow the faith of some." Paul was calling people out by name, where Jude was giving us the way to recognize the behaviors of evidently what were so many false teachers and false Christians. Paul called out people by name in these various churches, and he was telling Timothy, look, watch out for these two. They're going and as you know, they're going and telling people the wrong thing. But there's all these different strange teachings that were being, ideas that were being taught by the false teachers at the time, and just everything to deceive people. And the point of these deceptions, again, was to fulfill their basically their lust for the world, their greed for power and inappropriate relationships and all kinds of things. They were pulling all these things in, and they're doing all these things because of that. And then, as we studied in our study on 2 Peter, let's turn over to 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "But there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. And this warning and many of Peter's other warnings in that letter are what Jude is writing about in this letter. Again, Peter was saying, hey, y'all watch out for these things, they're coming. And then Jude is, again, saying, they're here. Y'all need to look out for these people. And then the Apostle John wrote on this in 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. Where John wrote, Beloved, oh, I'll give y'all a second, I'm sorry.
Chapter 1, verse 1.
Chapter 4, 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. It says, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. So John was talking about this also, which these were written sometime later we'll talk about. And then 3 John, just a few pages over, 3 John, verses 9 through 11. Says, I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, does not receive us. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words. And not content with that, he himself does not receive the brethren, and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. But he who does good is of God, but he who does evil has not seen God. The Apostle John, he wrote about false prophets long after Jude wrote. Most likely around 90 to 95 AD. Remember, the Book of Jude was written around 68 or 69 AD. So this is a good 30 years later that the 1st, 2nd, 3rd John were written. Some, significant time later. So this would indicate that the problem of the false prophets and false teachers continued for a long time after Jude wrote about it. And then it's continued for, all the way to today, and will continue for a long time to come. And John told the church to test or examine or prove any teacher that they run across. He wants them to test them, examine them, listen, okay, are you teaching right? Just like Tracy and I talked about when we've gone to visit other churches various times, and we're listening and we're taking in the message, but also at the same time we're examining what's being taught as to what we've already been taught through our studies and through, sitting under Gary and such. And that is like, wait a minute, he's not teaching right. The more you study, the more you're taught correctly, the easier it is to recognize when something's wrong. Interesting note is that the Secret Service is responsible for counterfeit money investigations. That's one of their things. That's what the Secret Service was originally founded on. And they don't show them in training, looking at counterfeit bills, they don't show them counterfeit bills. They look at real bills, real U.S. money, and they handle it and examine it so much that they get absolutely comfortable and they know without a doubt what that real bill looks like. So that when they come across a fake one, they know immediately this is not right, because they spend so much time with the real thing. And that's where it's great to listen to proper teaching, that right off the bat, as soon as you hear something that's screwy, right off the bat you're like, hang on a minute, that's not right. This person is not, he's not dividing the word properly, not studying, he's taking this out of context. We know exactly what's going on because you've heard the right thing taught so often. But with this much written to the church over time, that throughout all these different different letters by the apostles and from Jesus himself, this had to be a problem for a long time and had to be growing and growing and growing throughout all this time. The greatest problem with this going on today is the wide reach of the internet, because everybody with a smartphone has the ability to reach almost the entire world with a message in a very, very short period of time. You can get on YouTube or Facebook or TikTok and put something up, and with the right hashtag, the little keyword on there that somebody can look up, it'll pop up on their phones that, you know, they've been looking for this kind of information, this kind of content, and it'll jump out at you and pop up on your phones, and they can reach the entire world in no time. You know, what we call going viral in social media. It just runs, and it's so easy for just anybody to do that. At least during biblical times, information transfer was much shorter and or much slower, because it had to travel by an individual. Okay, it had to go by an individual, by them going somewhere and telling somebody what was going on, or by them carrying a letter from one place to another and that kind of thing. It had to physically travel from place to place, and from the author to the recipients, and it could take years or even decades for a message to reach around the known world at the time. And it was like that for almost 2,000 more years. You know, just until the last part of the 19th century, we didn't even have radio or telegraph. You know, we had, back in the late 1800s, you had telegraph come about that information could be transferred across the country, and then later on in the 20th century, in 1900s, you could send a message across the Atlantic Ocean through telegraph. And then we have radio, and then it progressed to TV and into the internet. And for the longest time, information had traveled from person to person to person. During medieval times, when that's how people got, and I'm sure back in biblical times, when information, or when somebody was traveling, they'd go stay at an inn somewhere, and they'd sit around in the common room of the place, around the fireplace and at the table, and they would say, well, where are you from? So what's going on in your town? What's going on in your town? You know, and that kind of thing. And that's how information spread, was straight up by word of mouth. Now, the fun part of that is you got the telephone game going, where one person tells something, and by the time it gets past two or three people down the chain, it's totally embellished or something forgotten or whatever, if they're just going by word of mouth. But at least during biblical times, it did travel much, much slower. And so they were somewhat limited in how false information could get transferred and pass along. But now it's instant. It's practically instant. We could pick up the phone right now and put something on, I refuse to have the TikTok app, but put something on TikTok and tag it the right way, and it's out there. It's everywhere.
The two-party lines were kind of like that too.
Yeah, the party lines on the phones, yeah.
I was an operator with all the cords. People would actually listen in to people.
Oh yeah, and then you wouldn't believe what so-and-so said, and they get it out of context and so on, and all those fun things.
I think it's amazing though that Jesus told us in Matthew, when you read it, what was going to take place, and then told us how he was going to be coming back, about when he was coming back, not to be dissuaded by these false Christs.
And because we got them today, we got people running around today in different parts of the world. A number of them are in Asia and the Pacific Islands and stuff, where people pop up in South America, where they go and present themselves as Jesus or as God himself or whatever, and they are misleading people left and right, and people are following them and doing whatever they say, and it's just awful. And as the joke goes, now people say, well, I saw it on the internet, so it must be true. And people take it as the gospel because they saw it on the internet. Just like a lot of the conspiracies and stuff relating to the hurricanes and different things like that, I don't know, I got a hard time believing some of this stuff, and people just runs and magnifies and magnifies and magnifies. And sorry, I got to see some proof on some of those things. And it's just wild, the things that people are saying. And that's on that kind of stuff, not even considering all the messed up teaching there is about the Bible and about Jesus and Christian living. But people believe all these things that they see on the internet because, well, it's there, it must be true. Because they, way back, things were vetted before it got put into print to some degree, especially in encyclopedias and things like that. You used to always go to the encyclopedias and the hard copy books. The publishers were kind of a gatekeeper to some of that information. Now it's just everywhere. But people, because of those things, people have lost their ability to think critically about what they see and hear and read. And they gobble up whatever they come across and they believe it. Whatever it is, if it tickles their mind, they believe it. So let's look again at Jude 18 here. Jude verse 18.
What year did you say Jude was written?
Jude was written in 68 or 69 AD.
That's what I put in there.
Yep. And Jude 18 reads, how they told you that there would be mockers in the last time who would walk according to their own ungodly lust. Well, the last time that Jude's referring to is the end times before Jesus returns. And as Jude wrote, these mockers would walk according to their own ungodly lust. They do as they please so that they can get whatever it is they want. Mostly money and status or influence or whatever other lewd behaviors. And the lewd behavior of the apostates and the false teachers must have been occurring on just a ridiculous scale at the time, with the emphasis that Jude is putting on this throughout the letter up to this point. And the false teachers, they've been doing this for a long, long time. Some of the ones we know today that are still on TV and internet today have been around for over 50 years, spreading their lies and misleading people. And there were many others before then that taught them how to mislead people. So this has been going for a long time. Again, thousands of years. And these people, they'll go and deceive you folks for decades and take their money. And most of them don't have the money to give away. That's one of the worst parts of it. These people don't even have the money to spare. And they're going and sending it to these people so that they can live their lavish lifestyles. Well, because we see these things happening over and over again, nothing ever happens, we get aggravated because they never get caught and they never get punished. Yeah, it aggravates me too. But, that's okay. It's in God's time. But this can cause you to wonder why God doesn't put a stop to all of it and just go ahead and have Jesus return now so that fewer people get deceived, because every day more and more and more people are getting deceived. Well, one answer to this is God is not in a hurry, as Gary's been teaching over and over again. God is in no hurry. He's in no hurry at all. He has his own plan and his own timeline for everything that happens. And we aren't capable, as mortal human beings, we're not capable of seeing the big picture as God sees it, much less comprehend it if he revealed it to us. Our puny little human minds, there's no way we can comprehend all that plan. There is no way at all. So, don't even try. Don't even try. Just trust God.
Grapefruit.
Yep, that little grapefruit-sized mind. Just trust God, and it'll be okay. Go with what's in the Bible, what He teaches, and teaches us through His Word, and it'll be all right. And another part of the answer as to why Jesus doesn't go ahead and return is that with every day that he's delayed, this allows for more people to come to know him. We've all got loved ones that don't know Jesus as our Savior. And if he came back right now, we got loved ones that would not be saved, that would not go. They would be here. They'd be stuck. So every day that goes by that Jesus delays is another day of opportunity that our loved ones and all these people that we don't know have the opportunity to hear the gospel and get saved. In addition, with all these things going on, the church has grown during periods of persecution. More people have come to know Christ during tough times than during good times. You know, people are much more likely to turn to God and come to saving faith during times of trouble than during good times. You can look at in Revelation 3:17 that Gary read this morning. Just talking about the church of Laodicea, where Jesus is talking to the lukewarm church in Laodicea. It says, "Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Because I'm rich, I don't need you. I'm good. I got everything I need." And through overconfidence and such, you come to that also. That was one of the things that was a hindrance to me before coming to the Lord, is that confidence. And Larry, you know this from being a police officer and firefighter and such. We've got to be able to handle it. Whatever's thrown in our lap, we've got to be able to deal with it. Because there's nobody else to call. It's us. So you have to have that level of confidence, and that can be a hindrance to coming to know the Lord, because I got it. I'm going to handle it no matter what. And that's how we get trained. And it's hard to overcome that when that's been drilled into you and that's been your life for so long. It's so hard to overcome. And for those that haven't been in that environment, it's really, it's hard to comprehend. But these people, they just keep going about their lives, again, because during good times, they forget about God because they think they don't need him. They just keep going about their lives and having fun and living their life, doing what they want. But during hard times, people tend to look toward God. They tend to look towards God a lot more because they realize, I can't do this on my own. I need some help. I need some help. You think there's a lot of praying going up in North Carolina and East Tennessee? I bet there is. I bet there's a whole lot of praying going on because those people are overwhelmed.
There's a lot of people praying for them here.
A lot of people elsewhere praying for them. That otherwise you forget about it. You forget about it. And this happened with the Jewish people during Old Testament times also, because they got fat and happy. Hey, we got it made. We got the temple. We got all the riches. We're living great. Nobody can defeat us. We're good. And they get complacent, and it falls apart. And they get taken off into captivity over and over again. And this happened with the church since then a number of times, where the church waned because during good times, then people just forgot about it. And they quit going because they're comfortable. I don't have a need. But we have to remember that it's all about God and his glory. It's not about us, no matter how much we want it to be. It is not about us. It's just not. It's not about us. It's about God and his glory, period. And that's the hard part for humans to understand. We all look towards ourselves. Why do you think we got mirrors all over the place? We got selfie cameras on our phones. It's about us. It's about us. No, it's not. That's what the world wants you to think, is that it's about you. It's not. It's about God and his glory. But most people aren't able to get themselves out of the way. That is hard to do, to get yourself out of the way and what you want, and you get aggravated because things aren't happening in your time, in what you think is the right timeline, And God's like, hang on, I got this. I got it. When I say the time is right, it is when this will happen. And that's a level of sanctification and spiritual maturity that's really hard to grow to. A lot of people just can't get to that point, and it's hard to get yourself out of the way. It really, really is. So let's take a look at verse 19 now, Jude 19, where it reads, "These are sensual persons who cause divisions, not having the Spirit." Jude is once again pointing out the sensual or sexual nature of what the false Christians and false teachers were doing. They must have been splitting the churches up and causing problems among the church members constantly. And because of these kind of mentions here, the sensual nature is what I'm talking about, that they may have been splitting churches by splitting up marriages through adulterous affairs, or even starting their own congregations that tolerated this type of behavior, like most cults do. Most cults have some kind of sexual aspect to them because the leaders are very charismatic and they just lure people in. And this could also be a holdover from the various pagan religions of the time, that where a lot of them focused on sexual behaviors as part of worship. You know, there were some pagan religions that had temple prostitutes and stuff like that even.
Is that what sensual persons means?
Yes, it's relating to our animal instincts, our greed, our sexual desires, things of that nature. That's what that's pointing to, is those deep animal instincts that we have. Not our, more mature adult concerns about well-being of others and helping things out, helping people out and caring for people and things like that. It's all selfish needs, meeting those selfish needs.
My translation says worldly minded. I think
Yeah.
that word.
Yeah, it's all about the world and what I can get out of the world.
Passions. And
All those things. Again, those emotional desires, that
Sound
we
like
have.
the view.
What translation?
You could.
NASB.
You may understand.
A number of years ago, flipping through channels, and I ran across this interview with this couple that claimed to be Christians that had an open relationship where they were running around with other people and such. They were claiming to be Christians. And they said that they used their lifestyle as a way to present the gospel to people that otherwise wouldn't be open to listening to it.
How?
Exactly. Because you could get in their circles and build relationships and all this mess is stupid. Just completely stupid. There's a lot going on there with that silliness. First, these people have been thoroughly misled about their salvation and, with a lifestyle like that. Somebody didn't teach them right. Okay? Somebody didn't teach them right in church. Second, they've not been taught properly how to live the Christian life. They've not been taught the whole Bible, the whole ways of living as a Christian. And then third, they just wanted to follow their own lustful desires and live just however they pleased. And this is just a way of justifying their behavior.
That's it.
They just, that's how I'm going to justify this. It's a way to reach people and get close to them and be able to talk to them about these things. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? And people will find a way to justify about anything. They'll justify, breaking in Dollar General store because the power's out and everything, because I need whatever. Well, we had Dollar General store broken into in town 4 times, this one Dollar General store. And every time they stole, there was a trail of Slim Jims from the shelf all the way to the door. The Slim Jim snacks. They didn't steal real food, they didn't steal toilet paper, they didn't steal bottled water, or even Cokes, or anything like that. They were stealing junk. They broke in another one and stole some cigarettes and stuff. Really? You know, so, and they're justifying it by, well, I need it. Store's closed, there's no power, I don't have power, I can't go anywhere, I can't get to wherever else, to Columbia where there is power, to be able to get these things, so I'm just gonna break in and take it, because I want it. And they justify it to themselves.
That's really back to me.
Mm-hmm, me. You know, during the riots in 2020, a lot of people, when they were looting stores, well, I've been oppressed all these years, and that's why I'm gonna break in here and steal me a 72-inch TV.
This is my chance to do what I want.
Yeah, I'm getting mine. I'm getting my due here, taking what's mine, what I ought to be able to buy. And that's what people will justify whatever. So anyway, I'm sure the enemy was just absolutely thrilled by these false Christians and the false Christians that these people helped to create. People that thought they were believers, thought they were born again, but they're still living these crazy, sinful lifestyles. Just absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Thing is, if you look years later, their situation is probably even worse.
Probably so. Probably so.
They're not together.
Most likely. It's just stupid. Just absolutely stupid.
Consequences.
But that's what people do. Then that's the kind of that I'm sure something like that was going on. You know, at that time. You know, even in Jamaica with the Rastafarians, they believe that smoking marijuana helps you get closer to God through your high. Well, it's a way to justify what they want to do, is all it is. And it's about me. Me.
Is that involved in the meditating and all that?
Maybe so. The Rastafarians, that's all, it's a mixture of some Christianity and some of the African religions and so on. It's a real mix of all that kind of voodoo, those kind of craziness there. But the meditations and stuff, a lot of that's all focused on me, my inner self, those kind of things. When people are, a lot of the Eastern meditation focus is all about focusing on your inner self.
What does it mean when they claim that going to those meetings, one part of it at some point is encouraging yourself, throwing up a lot?
Those things that
kind of,
there's a bunch of stuff going on there with those, and they'll take drugs or different concoctions of mushrooms or whatever kind of plants that are mildly poisonous, and it'll cause them to throw up, and it's a physical, in their mind, in these teachings and all those kind of things, it's a physical manifestation of getting rid of their inner evil thoughts. There's a treatment that you can go to down in Mexico or Central America, South America, somewhere down that way. There are a lot of people go to for post-traumatic stress disorder, where they go and do these shaman rituals and all this mess and take these different concoctions made from jungle plants that put them in these trances, and they hallucinate, and again they throw up and all this stuff, and they feel like it's helping them purge all those inner demons, basically, that the way they're putting it, all those harmful thoughts, all those harmful experiences they've had. And those things, that's just craziness.
India does.
Yeah, in India, what's that?
It's harmful.
It's harmful, yeah, absolutely. There's better ways of dealing with PTSD. A whole lot better ways of dealing with it than going and doing that mess. But these are all ways to deceive people and distract them from the gospel and from Jesus. But these are some of the ways that the enemy works, and is by causing people to be tempted by their base or animal instincts and drives. People will do a lot of very, very stupid things when they're following those desires. And we've seen this a lot recently with a number. It seems like every week you get another prominent pastor that is being put out of their church or is having to step down from the ministry for, or even being disqualified from future ministry because of inappropriate relationships.
You hope that they're stepping down or.
Well, there's a bunch we hear about them that are being kicked out. For example, Steve Lawson, very prominent. He was a really good teacher. He was close to John MacArthur and such. I was drawing like I was saying, close to John MacArthur. Really good teacher, but he just got busted. He had a 5-year-long relationship with this woman that wasn't his wife, and she was 25 years old and he's 60 something. And his whole ministry squashed like a bug. Squashed like a bug. Over stupidity. Absolute
Over self.
stupidity. Over selfish desires. Absolute stupidity. That whole ministry, I mean, there's no telling how many people he reached and could continue reaching for the Lord and teaching right. But he had that going on in the background. Fulfilling those base needs, those base desires, and getting lured in. Just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And he's just the latest one. There's a bunch of them over the last 6 months that have gotten busted and they're out of ministry because of it. Their ministries are gone. Fortunately, some of them were not good teachers and they needed to stop. But there's just so much that going on, it's stupid. And all these people have large followings and everything. And it makes you ask, what were they thinking? What in the world were they thinking? Well, the answer is they weren't. They weren't thinking. They fell into temptation and into the snare of the devil himself. They stepped right into his snare. Stepped right into his snare. And verse 19 ends with not having the Spirit. This means, according to the Greek words this is translated from, that they didn't have the divine influence, temperament, or disposition of mind that a person who has the Holy Spirit indwelling them would have. If somebody's actually a born-again Christian, they have the Holy Spirit living inside them. The Holy Spirit is part of God Himself. Part of God Himself. And if part of God Himself is inside you, how can you not be changed? How can you not be guided? At least to some degree. Some people quench the Spirit and put it aside and limit the influence, but because of their self, they just keep following their selfish desires. But how could you not be changed? By having part of God Himself inside you, influencing you. And that's what these people, these false teachers, they don't. Again, they said test the spirits. Test the teachers. Evaluate them. Approve or disapprove of them. See if they're teaching right. And if they're going and doing these things, you have to question, do they even have the Holy Spirit inside them? Or are they just putting on? Have they deceived themselves? If so, somebody deceived them first, most likely. Taught them wrong, taught them shallowly. And then they deceived themselves into thinking that they were born again. So, again, Jude is telling us how to recognize these people. You know, we told you that they would be here, they'd walk according to their own ungodly lust, they're sensual persons, causing divisions, not having the Spirit. Going and breaking up churches and relationships and everything else because of their own desires. And it's just crazy, just absolute craziness. And that's how you recognize these false teachers. More ways. Jude, this is a whole lesson on recognizing false Christians, false teachers, apostates. People that have heard the word and turned away from it. That's what this whole letter is about, recognizing them so that you can not follow them and you can help pull other people away from them and not let them be deceived. Any questions or comments?
I have some comments I'd like to make.
All right, thank you.
When it's not on.
All right,